Hello everybody, this is a Literature Paper 1 revision video on how to approach planning for Macbeth. I will also upload a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde video later. So, just to clarify, the paper is Literature Paper 1 and you only have 1 hour and 45 minutes to complete both sections. Section A is a Macbeth extract from across the play, so it could be from the beginning, the middle or the end. We do not know. But what we do know is that the question for the extract will say something along the lines of, how has so-and-so's character been presented, or how has this theme been presented in this extract and in the play as a whole. As for section B, we are going to focus on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And again, luckily, the question format is very much the same. A question about a character or a theme in the extract and how that same character or theme has been presented in the play as a whole. So just to clarify the mark scheme, and I forgot to point out, I'll add that later. So you've got AO1, AO2 and AO3. AO1 is your ability to answer the question. So the best way to do that is to make sure that your point sentences, the way you start your paragraph, your point sentences must use the question's keyword. So if the keyword is ambition, I would expect you to add something along the lines of, in your point sentences, Banquo's character is presented to be ambitious, so and so. So I expect you to use the word ambition in your answer, in your point sentence. So hopefully that's obvious. And as I said before, AO1 quotes, I forgot to mention that, but I'm mentioning that now, quotes from both the extract and, unfortunately, across the play. So if you don't actually get quotes from across the play, unfortunately you're shooting yourself in the foot, because the examiner needs proof that you've actually read the play as a whole. And if you just get quotes from the extract, there's no real evidence that you've read and studied the play as a whole. So please, please, please try and memorize as many quotes as possible from the beginning, the middle and the end of the play. AO2 is your ability to analyze language techniques and structural devices used by Macbeth. Used in Macbeth by Shakespeare. Okay, so another thing you need to also bear in mind is AO2 is your ability to link the extract with events later on in the play, with events earlier on in the play. That again is proof to the examiner that you have indeed read the play as a whole. Now I'm just talking about Macbeth in detail, as I said before, so don't panic. I will be creating a video on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde later on. So consider the effect of language, structure, devices and or events on the audience. So AO3 is all about context, the setting of the play, when it was written, the setting of the play as when it was set, and the audience of the play when Shakespeare wrote the play. Who were they? What were their historical, social and political beliefs? And again, this is proof that you've researched and studied the play properly. So I hope that you remember AO1, AO2, AO3 along these lines. AO1 using the question as an answer and quotes. AO2 methods, so that means language, techniques and structure. And AO3 context, historical, social, political context and your ability to consider the effect of devices on the audience. Now that's the proper AQA mark scheme. So just in case you wanted word for word, the mark scheme, that is it. However, section A is worth 34 marks. The extra 4 marks are available because of spelling, punctuation and grammar. So you need to make sure you spell properly, that you use punctuation marks, so capital letters and full stops, and that you also use advanced vocabulary. Your sentences must make sense. I recommend that you use shorter sentences because sometimes students tend to panic and waffle and their sentences are so long and they don't make any sense. So please control yourself, think about quality rather than quantity. So let's look at an example mock paper. Apologies for the small font, but I wanted to add everything on one slide just so that I can talk you through it slowly. The Act 3, Scene 1. This is an example mock. In this scene, Banquo, blah, blah, blah. So you can see here clearly that the examiner is kindly giving you the context, the situation of this extract, reminding you what happened in Act 3, Scene 1, which is really cool because, let's be honest, the examiner didn't have to do that. And then we look at the question, okay, over here with the red box. Question, starting with this extract, explain how Shakespeare presents the relationship between Macbeth and Banquo. Remember, it says starting with this extract. So you are expected to use quotes from the extract and then link those quotes with quotes from across the play. Okay, so this is what I would recommend you do. break down your question into two parts. Number one is extract. Number two is across the play. So you could just write down extract across the play. And then you read this carefully and you look for points about Macbeth and Banquo's relationship in the extract. So if we look here, and just to save you time, I've given you some example point sentences, because what I'm doing in this video is telling you how to plan rather than giving you a walking talking mock, which I can do later on. So let's focus on how to plan. What you should plan is three things, just three things, 3-point sentences from the extract, and then naturally I'd expect you to get 3-point sentences from across the play. So 3 things that you could tell me about Macbeth and Banquo's relationship at the beginning, middle, and end of the play to prove to the examiner that you've read the play. Okay, so with this one here, Banquo is being quite secretive. He is talking to himself and telling himself how odd it is that Macbeth has been so successful so suddenly, and that he feels that Macbeth has played most foully for it. That means Macbeth must have dabbled in evil for it. He also says to himself, well, Macbeth has been so successful, and if the witches were telling the truth, then I might have a fantastic future as well, because they told me that myself should be the root and father of many kings. So he's pretty excited secretly, but does he tell this to Macbeth's face? Nope. So Macbeth doesn't enter until the end of this speech, because he says, "But hush, no more." I mean, if you wanted evidence of secrecy, it's there. So that's my point. Secrecy. Banquo seems to have a deceitful character in this extract. Point number 2. Banquo is suspicious. Remember, I fear thou playest most foully for it. He's talking about Macbeth there. And then finally, because it's a Macbeth and Banquo's relationship, I've pointed out that Macbeth also has a deceitful character. We know that very well. They act like they are still the best of friends with utmost respect for one another. So let's look over here. Look at what Macbeth says. "Here's our chief guest." Who is he talking about? Well, he seems to be talking about Banquo, because he's just walked in to see Banquo. And now, look at how Banquo responds. "Let your highness command upon me, to the which my duties are with a most indissoluble tie forever knit." So he's saying there, "Oh yes, king, I am always at your service. I am always here for you." So this false loyalty, which we know is not true. We got 3 points there from the extract. And what did I do? I identified quotes, and if I had the paper in front of me, I would be underlining quotes. I would not be wasting time writing out the quotes again. There's no point doing that. Please, please, please don't do that. So I'd write down number 1, number 2, and number 3. And then for each point, I'd find a quote. So I'd write down secrecy. And my quote for that is, "But hush, no more." And I'd put number 1 here, right here, so that you can see that is the quote that I will be using. And then Banquo is suspicious. Which one would I use? So I underline, "Thou playest most foully for it." That shows Banquo is suspicious. Macbeth is a deceitful character. Yes, I'd say here's our chief guest, because we know that Macbeth is a paranoid character right now, because we've read earlier on and later on in the play. But where's the quote that really shows that he's deceitful? This one as well, because again, he's saying, "Here's our chief guest," when we know that Banquo is not the chief guest. Banquo is not his superior. Okay, so that is what we have there. Now we need to think about 3 points about Macbeth and Banquo's relationship across the play. So what I've done again is I've saved you some time, and I've showed you. I'm going to show you how to plan. Okay, so secrecy. Do you remember when Macbeth hides his plan to kill King Duncan from Banquo? There you go. There's an example from earlier on in the play. Suspicious. Macbeth trusts Lady Macbeth instead of Banquo. He's suspicious of Banquo. Do you remember that quote? "We have scorched the snake, not killed it." That is an implicit reference to Banquo's character. And then deceitful. We also have Macbeth's deception, as he plans to kill Banquo and successfully does so. So that's an example of then planning for later on in the play. So I've got 3 points from earlier on in the extract. 3 points from the extract, 3 points from across the play, and now I should be able to write my essay. Okay, but just to clarify, annotation is planning, and there are 3 things, 3 steps in your planning. Okay, step one is obviously read the extract, break down the question, make sure that you're underlining possible relevant quotes from the extract to do with the question, because annotation, believe it or not, is planning. Those of you who don't annotate, it actually hurts to see you not annotating, because that tells me you are going to spend a lot of time rereading that extract, searching for relevant quotes. You've wasted time. Please don't do that. So hunt for quotes that represent Banquo and Macbeth's relationship, and then write 3 points about what they seem to suggest about the relationship. So I looked at the extract, I then found links with the rest of the play, and now the final ingredient, links with context. Historical, social, political things that we could link. So my first paragraph, remember I said I'm going to talk about secrecy in the extract and then link it with the rest of the play. I'm going to say later Macbeth hides his plan to kill King Duncan from Banquo. Sorry, not later. Oh, there's a typo there. Please ignore the later. Thank you. So Macbeth hides his plan to kill King Duncan from Banquo earlier. And then you've got regicide, Jacobean audience reaction. That is the historical context you could compare it to and link it to, because your historical information, I don't expect a paragraph, okay, because that's not what the examiner wants. The examiner only wants short, sharp, relevant references to any historical, social, political context. Okay, so that should have been earlier. I'll fix that later. And then suspicious, okay. Can any of you give me an example later on in the play where Macbeth and Banquo's relationship seems to be that of suspicion and paranoia? Okay, and then you'd add historical information about the way in which suspicion was presented. Suspicion, what were the audience suspicious about? The Jacobean audience, and would they agree with Macbeth and Banquo's suspicion or not? And then the final comment is deceitful. And then who can tell me later on in the play how deception is presented by Macbeth or Banquo? Well, obviously Macbeth kills Banquo. Not directly, he hires murderers, but nevertheless, if it wasn't for Macbeth, Banquo would still be alive. So you've got that deception there later on in the play, and then you have to tell me some historical, social, political context. And so we need to know that killing your fellow soldier is not acceptable under any circumstances. It's treason, isn't it, if he's on your side? So clearly that is how to plan. So just remember there's 3 things: extract, links with the rest of the play, links with context. So that is the part 1 of our revision for Macbeth. I will then create a video on how to structure your paragraphs for Literature Paper 1, and this is relevant for Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Macbeth. Okay, so just before I end this video, I just want to tell you that I will be explaining these 3 key ingredients to structure your paragraphs: point, quote, bigger picture. Thank you. Good luck.